30 seconds to introduce.
Well, obviously, Minister, we've had the Brexit Contingency Action Plan since last December, with sectoral analysis and so on, and the various costs of the mitigations across the government. And I just wonder, what changes maybe, or what other plans you've made in that regard, in particular in relation to revenue, and to indeed to all other areas where Brexit is already impacting. Because obviously now we have the uncertainty extended to the 31st of October, but at any time almost we could be dealing with a disorderly Brexit. So what are any revised plans, Minister? Thanks.
Since the UK referendum result in 2016, my government colleagues and I have taken a number of steps to build up the resilience of our economy so that we have the capacity to deal with adverse economic shocks. These include building up our budgetary buffers by balancing our books. The steady increase in public spending implemented in recent years, with a particular focus on public capital investment, up by approximately €1.4 billion in 2019, plays an important role in supporting resilience in the face of Brexit. Budget 2019 was prepared based on the central scenario that the UK will make an orderly exit from the European Union. In total, a gross voted allocation of €66.6 billion is provided across all government departments. This includes additional expenditure of approximately €115 million related to Brexit, and follows the dedicated measures to prepare for Brexit announced in Budget 17 and 18. This funding will enable the implementation of necessary measures, including the areas of customs and food safety. Additional funding was provided to the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine and its agencies to further strengthen the agriculture sector's ability to become more resilient in addressing the challenges of Brexit. From a revenue point of view, we brought 400 staff in place. They were all fully appointed between the period September 2018 and April 2019, and Deputy Broughan will be continuing to assume that Brexit will occur at the end of October. That's my working assumption. The only question is what the nature of that Brexit will be.
This afternoon, you'll be giving us a briefing on the SPU at the Budget Oversight Committee. But last week, I think we had the ESRI, Professor McQuinn and Professor Bergen, and I think their basic figures were a bit shocking. And they talked about trade shock and so on. That different kinds of the three Brexit scenarios: deal, no deal, or disorderly. But even when you look at the figures, no deal, reduction in growth by 2.6% to 0.8% in 2020, and reduced level of real output in the Irish economy over 10 years by 2.6%. But the thing that struck us most, I suppose, is the impact on households, where they were saying that the impact of Brexit, of the three scenarios, and you have to agree, I think, Minister, that already the uncertainty is impacting on us, because we're beginning to see impacts on imported goods. For example, the way prices maybe are rising with the fact that sterling and the euro may be moving towards parity. But the impact on households, Esri told us, would be, varies between 2.2% lower in a deal scenario, 3.9% lower. That's real personal disposable income, 3.9% in a no deal, and 4.2% in a disorderly no deal. But whatever way you looked at it, households will be severely impacted. And are you preparing then to cost the kind of social transfers we may need for the most vulnerable households? We've heard, for example, of supports possibly from the European Union, Commissioner Hogan, for farmers, for maybe industry, for other areas of the Irish economy. But households may be forgotten about in this, and is that something that's going into your general mix on how we might deal with this major crisis for our country?
We've already published our own estimates regarding what impact we believe a disorderly Brexit would have on our economy, and they are included in the Stability Programme update, which, as you said, we'll be discussing this afternoon. And yes, in the figures that we have published in relation to what would be the impact on the government's financial position, it does assume that we would need to borrow in order to ensure that the income support programmes that we have in our country, our social insurance schemes, would be able to meet the additional demand that would be upon them. And look, there is a huge amount of conjecture regarding what will be the effect per home and per citizen, because this is such a unique event that we are facing into, and we're still unsure what it will look like. But the one thing is clear, that a Brexit scenario of any kind will not be as good as the current trading relationship that we have with the UK. It will shift. That therefore will affect our economy, and that therefore means that schemes that we have in place to support citizens and families will be needed.
Final
Just in relation to revenue and to customs and so on, have you had ongoing contacts with the UK government in relation to proposals that they seem to talk about in their public discourse about different ways of preserving the border, of having no border in this country? Has there been any discussion along those lines, or in relation to technology, or in relation to the cost of technologies which would ensure that we would continue, as Speaker Pelosi said, to have a seamless border in Ireland? Just to ask you again, just in relation to obviously the loss of 80,000 jobs, which Professor McQuinn and Professor Broughan gave as a postulation in the worst type of disorderly Brexit, it is very, very profound, the impact on public finances and so on. So at the end of the day, obviously October 31st, we're into our SPU now, we're into our budget cycle, but is it still possible, given a situation in the UK, that we may need to have a revised budget possibly next month in order to address some of the matters that we've discussed?
In relation to whether a revised budget is going to be needed this year, the answer to that question is no. I indicated when we're facing into the prospect of Brexit that I would not be presenting another budget to the House, and instead what I would allow to happen is the so-called automatic stabilisers, which is what you are referring to, which is the fact that people will need support. They will need support from the Department of Social Protection, the Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation. We would simply let that happen and let that flow through to a budgetary position that would be then different to where we were on budget day last year. The view that I articulated then is even clearer now, because if Brexit does occur, and when Brexit does occur, it will be even later in the year than we had previously thought. So that view is unchanged. In relation to your question about am I engaging with British government in relation to the use of technology on the border, the answer to that question is no. All of the engagement that I have had with the British government, which is primarily with the Chancellor Philip Hammond, has always been about the backstop and about how we can avoid having to put in place infrastructure on the border itself.
Deputy Bernard Durkan, 30 seconds.